What's a small lie you told as a kid that somehow spiraled way out of control? Story 1. My younger brother was a really dumb kid. I managed to convince him that badgers were mythical creatures like dragons or unicorns. He then freaked me out after seeing a dead badger on the road on his way to school. They had to call our parents. But that's not where it ends. During the subsequent talk about badgers actually being real and seeing one wasn't noteworthy, he confessed that the reason he was dumb was because he had a carrot in his brain. A couple of years before, I'd done a really shitty attempt at a sleight of hand trick. I pushed a carrot into his head, but actually pushed it up my sleeve. It never even occurred to me that he thought it was real. Head spent the last couple of years literally thinking he had a carrot in his brain, and that was the reason he sucked at spelling. Story 2. Not even a lie, but when I was a kid I went out for a walk and found this burnt-out car in the woods, and in school the next day I told my friend about this car I found. Somehow in just that one day it spiraled into me being the one that stole the car and set it on fire. Ended up having police visit the house to interview me a few days later. Story 3. I was probably first grade or so. We had a punching bag in the basement of the house, and I was enjoying playing with it. Eventually it got to be bedtime, and being 6 years old I was protesting. I told my parents that classroom had threatened to beat me up and I had to learn how to protect myself. I didn't know how seriously my parents would take that threat. They called off work and met with the principal first thing. I was always a good kid and the other kid always got in trouble, so they took my word for it, gave him detention, rearranged the classroom seating arrangement, and instituted a buddy system for me for recess and the lunchtime. All because I wanted to stay up an extra 15 minutes. Story 4. I used to sneak out of the house in the middle of the night as a teenager. We had a rickety back screen door that my parents both loved the sound of because it reminded them of an old country screen door. I required this door to commence my nighttime shenanigans. I WD-40'd the hinges to make it quieter. What I did not intend was for it to silence the country creakiness entirely. I felt terrible because I also liked the creaky door, but my selfish carried on. Never heard a word from my parents. No comments on why the door suddenly became quiet or anything. I got away with murder. Around 10 years later, my dad was telling some stories about his own father and the narcissist antics he used to get up to. One of these stories was about the time my parents confronted my grandfather for lubricating the door hinges on this screen door. He talked about how a huge argument ensued about how my grandfather thinks he knows better than everyone else, and that he couldn't just mind his own business and let my parents enjoy their own stupid creaky door in their own stupid house. As this was absolutely characteristic of my grandfather, my plan turned out to be accidentally genius because they were in town up from California at the time. No one suspected dummy teenage damandemic, because of course Grandpa did it. Dad, I feel safe confessing this now because of how long it's been. That was me. I lubed up the door hinges. Shocked silence for about 10 seconds, and then one of the hardest belly laughs I've ever heard out of my dad. Story 5. Pre-internet days my mom asked me to watch the lottery draw on TV and write down the winning numbers. I found her ticket on top of the fridge and wrote her numbers down as the winning ones. Needless to say, she wasn't impressed. Story 6. Not me, but a classmate in like 2nd grade was always bragging about the fact that her mom was Xena warrior princess in real life, constantly telling literally everyone as if she truly believed it herself. And then Parents' Day at school happened and everyone was clamoring to see this girl's mom and yes, she was not Xena. Story 7. Okay, we joked about it once, my wife and I, that my son had an older brother who he just missed him by 5 minutes. I think we picked it up from a stand-up comic. I think we told him that when he was 3, then forgot about it. He never asked about it afterwards, either. When he was 6, we were in a parent-teachers conference. The teacher expressed, like many people before her, how young we looked as parents. We had our son at 1921, so we were used to that in an area where most mothers waited until their late 20s, early 30s, to have kids. Yes, well, we had him when I was 19, my wife would answer. This teacher, however, paused. How old is his brother? His brother, he's an only child, I see. He doesn't have an older brother who goes to night school. No, that's strange. He has here in his 1st grade survey that he has an older brother, around college age. Well, I can assure you that he does not. Do you live with someone else? An uncle, perhaps? No. Did he describe this older brother? My wife and I had a lot of oddball friends in the local entertainment scene, so maybe he was speaking about one of them, and there was a miscommunication. No, he says he's always gone when he comes home, usually misses him by 5 minutes, so I assumed he worked at night, or went to college night school. Children have an active imagination. The second she said, missed him by 5 minutes, my wife and I looked at one another. Oh yeah, that was a weird conversation with our son later that night. He really thought he had an older brother. No, that was a joke from a TV show. Story 8. In 2nd grade I bragged that my uncle invented the post-it note. It snowballed until the PTA tried to invite him for career day, so I claimed he'd moved to Antarctica to test glue in the cold. People were still asking about him when I hit middle school. Story 9. We were terribly poor, and any time I was sick or injured my parents instead lied to me saying, no, you're just eating too many bananas. That makes your knees hurt, or you're not sick, you're tired. You just run through the woods all day. I am in my 40s now and still struggle with getting medical help for stuff. I almost died 2 years ago from pneumonia because I had it in my head I was doing something wrong. Story 10. I was out of school for a funeral. When I told my teacher, I said my uncle died. The problem with this is that the great uncles and older cousins in my family get called uncle, and my deceased family member was in his 90s and I've only met him once. I ended up getting pulled out of recess every day for a week to talk to a counselor. Story 11 for the record, I really was a twin, however, I was a fraternal twin boy-girl pair. We had a substitute teacher one day and one of my bullies was picking on me for something or other again. I decided that I had enough and I poured clear glue on her chair. She sat down on it and her skirt got all sticky and stiff. Her tights stuck to the chair, it was a mess. The substitute asked who did it and obviously someone ratted me out. When I was asked about the incident I said I'm not Phantom. I'm Maria, I'm her twin, we switched places today. I'm supposed to be in the other 4th grade class. The substitute left a note that said Phantom's twin switched places and glued a girl's skirt. No complaints about Phantom except that she was not in class like she was supposed to be, but another teacher said there was no issue for one day. My teacher was back the next day and she pulled me aside, telling me it wasn't funny to switch places with my twin because there are a lot of safety issues and school rules we are breaking by switching. She went next door to the other 4th grade class and told the other teacher about the glue incident. He got in trouble for it. My twin was already a troublemaker while I was the nerdy goody-goody twin. When we got home and argued about me getting him in trouble, our mom marched right up and asked us to explain. She, of course, did not believe that a teacher would fall for the twin switching story because we were a fraternal boy-girl pair. He got grounded at home too. From that moment on, whenever I did something I wasn't supposed to, he would sarcastically say, "Oh, was it Maria?" Which just ended up backfiring because our classmates ended up thinking I had a twin named Maria and that my twin brother was a really year older but got held back. It wasn't until high school that one of our classmates, who was also part of a boy-girl twin pair, was complaining that she never got to pull the twin switch thing and he got snarky and said ask Phantom how to do it. I bet she'd love to share. I had to confess because he sounded so upset and he had my back about something earlier that day. Story 12 convinced my baby nephew that his name Max was short for Maximus. He was born on my birthday. My brother, his dad, didn't tell me happy birthday or get a card or anything. Instead just announced his kid was born and called Max my favorite baby boy name that I had told the whole family I wanted to call my future son for years, so I was like, okay, let's play this game. Yeah, I was miffed, but it was more all tongue-in-cheek. I convinced Maximus that even though his parents raised him, he actually belongs to me and is my birthday present. He took it very seriously. He told everyone his name was short for Maximus. Whenever his parents tried to correct him, he'd say no, that's not true, I'm auntie birthday present, she named me. When they'd look at me for help I'd shrug and go, you should have told me happy birthday LMAO. Story 13. Oh, I have one. When I was about 8 I was super lonely and had no friends at school. I was the weird kid and nobody liked me. One day, I overheard a group of kids in my class talk about all running away from home together. They hatched a plan to all meet in front of the school that night at 1000. I wanted so badly to be cool and I had some issues at home, so I told them I would come too. I was super anxious about it all night, and after I went to bed I watched the clock and debated if I was actually going to go. I finally got the nerve and I just left. Still in my pajamas, didn't pack anything, just left. I walked out the garage side door and headed to school. It was about 45 blocks away and I know I made it on time, but when I showed up, nobody was there. They all ditched me. I was heartbroken. I waited as long as I could but ended up walking home again bawling. Some nice woman with her teenage daughter were driving by and saw me walking. She pulled over to try and help, but I freaked and ran all the way back home. When I got back I saw the lights were on in the garage and the big door was open. My parents were calling for me. I didn't know what else to do, so I just walked in and stared at them. Apparently they had just realized I was gone and started searching outside. When they asked what happened I didn't want to admit it, so I just said I don't know and they believed me. My dad, a doctor, said that I must had a sleepwalking spell and I just went along with it. For the next year my mom would do extra checks on me after bedtime, and she took me to the doctor for a checkup and to talk about the sleepwalking. They told friends and family about my scary sleepwalking episode, and every once in a while they'd say things to me like, you really don't remember, you got all the way outside, and I'd just stick to the story. It kind of became this funny family story that my cousins would tease me about since it always came up if I went to stay with them. Oh, and the kids from school actually did just ditch me that night. They changed the time and went earlier. They all got caught running away and got punished. It was big news at the school since they planned it all there during recess. My parents still don't know the real story. They eventually realized I was in a bad place and switched me schools and life got better. I mostly forgot about the whole thing until my dad brought up the story again to my husband right after we got married. I just laughed it off but finally told my husband the real story when we got home. He's the only one who knows the truth. Story 14. Not me but my sister. This was around 1991 in Chicago, so we were 7 and 9 years old respectively. There was this hysteria at the time about Homie the Clown, which was a character on TV, but supposedly there was a man in the area dressed as him and trying to lure kids with candy into his van. There were sightings reported all over the city by children's, and the cops and local news was all over it. One day during class my sister claimed she saw Homie hiding in a bush by the school, so they put the school on lockdown until the police could investigate. She did not in fact see Homie, or any other clown. Story 15. I had a friend who was an early teen back in the 60s. She went to summer camp and heard Turn, Turn, Turn by the Byrds for the first time, and she taught herself to sing and play it on guitar. When she returned home she was showing it to her friends who had not yet heard the song in the radio, and she claimed that she had written this song. A few weeks later the song finally hit the radio in her hometown. Oh no, Seth Ramir's friend. They stole your song. Obviously they eventually figured it out. Nobody ever looked at me the same after that, she said. Story 16. Said I liked vegetables so I wouldn't disappoint my grandma. Next family dinner, full plate of boiled Brussels sprouts. I cried, she cried, the Brussels sprouts won. Story 17. My cousin told me there's this clown that visits kids at the middle of the night and plays with them. I think she was trying to encourage me to use my imagination more. For some reason, I pictured the creepiest cow dressed up as a clown, flying in from the sky in the middle of the dark with an evil grin, going time to play in the corner of a dark room. I couldn't sleep at night, BC. I thought it would randomly come. Ick what happened, but eventually my mom found out I was scared of some random clown and spoke to my cousin. We all laughed after, but I still have no idea why my brain turned something so casual into such a horror. Story 18. I walked home from school before it started and told my mom we didn't have school that day, but a couple of hours later, a truant officer came to ask why I wasn't in school. Damn, did I get into trouble? Story 19. When I was probably 4 or 5 years old, my grandparents bought my sibling and I one of those electric keyboard pianos. It had a mode that would light up the keys red to teach you how to play the song. Little me discovered there was also a setting that plays the correct key regardless of what you press when it was on, and it also stopped the red lights from showing. I did my best dramatic pianist performance in front of my mother. She was floored, thinking I was some sort of reborn Mozart, a piano prodigy out of nowhere. She called all of our family members over to watch me perform and exclaimed to them my baby is going to Juilliard. I got nervous with all the people around and ended up confessing in front of 6 family members that the piano was basically playing itself. LMAO. Story 20. So my dad was super strict about me leaving the house. In high school, my friend and I wanted to go to the nearby 7-Eleven and get some cards, and I was under strict orders to go straight there. But then come right back, we get to the store, sold out, but another 7-Eleven is a few blocks away, just a few extra minutes. We speed walk there, get the cards, come home. That was too late. My dad yelled at me for being up to something. Now the problem is he asked how I got to the store, and I actually described the wrong street, so it got even messier. But I refused to admit I went anywhere else. Friend was sent home, and I was grounded until I confessed. This is about 5 minutes beyond his expected travel time. I was grounded for a month, with him mapping out his theories on where I went, just absurd ideas. I finally told him. He was clearly humiliated. It was so simple, so I got another month of no leaving the house besides school. Story 21. When I was 11, I had a book report due. I didn't do it, and pretended to be sick that day with a handful of vague symptoms, intending on cramming through the book report while I was absent. Instead, my mom took me to the doctor, and it turned out I had mono for real. I was out of school for 6 weeks and still never got around to doing that book report. It was assumed that the tutor the school sent to my house had misplaced it. Story 22. 6-year-old nephew. We had a bonfire in the backyard. He wanted to go play on the edge of the yard, but there's a lake on that side and we didn't want him over there in the dark. Came up with a monster known as Frogman, human-sized frog that lived in the lake, and were known to populate other swampy areas. Now he is terrified of dark swampy water, a bullfrog croaking. Story 23. Not mine, but when we were kids my cousin told me that I murdered someone while sleepwalking and that the police were looking for me. I believed him. LMAO. Story 24. Was skipping church service one day and the phone in the copy room, just chilling. Some guy came through and tried to make me go to service, and I told him I didn't know him and he could mind his own business. He got steamed and asked me for my name. I told him Larry McMuddy because Lonesome Dove had been on TV lately. The miniseries adapted from the novel. After church, was walking out with my mom and stepdad and some dude comes running up calling out to my mom, MS McMurtry, MS McMuddy, I need to speak with you. She laughs now, telling the story to others, but at the time she was livid. Story 25. When I was younger, I had a lot of family problems. We'll preface it that way. I would jump from school to school, all but one in the same county. One school, I decided to tell people I had a twin brother and we switched on certain days. His name was JT. Also when I was younger, my mom told me I was a year younger than everyone else because I was super smart, so she'd tell me I was born a year later. Both of these things led to one. Some people thinking my name was JT when I was in middle high school also became a funny joke, and two, had a group of people in middle high school that thought I was a year younger than I actually was. Not out of control, but I still cringe at both, especially the age thing because I didn't know for the longest time, should I tell people, will it matter? Eventually I did, and I was just like, yeah, my mom kinda lied to me a lot. Story 26. Informed my classmates my brother and I were twins. Continued for years. Stories regarding his non-attendance have to be made up. My folks were not amused when my teacher finally called them. Story 27. Trying not to laugh. In 4th grade I told a girl new to our school that she had to say the word or nobody would like her. Oddly enough, we became best friends for years. Story 28. I once told my little brother carrots made you see in the dark if you ate enough. He believed it until high school biology class. To this day at family dinners, someone will pass him the carrots for better night vision. Story 29. A friend and I found a dead duck once at the park. I don't factually know anymore what happened next. When I was in the embellished stories to sound dramatic and cool stage of life, I retold the duck story so many times and with so many new details that I genuinely cannot remember what was true. Did we really bury the duck in a hole we dug with plastic cups? Or did we do anything at all? I don't know. I lied so much I don't know the truth anymore for that life event. So not a huge drama, just troubling to me that my lies erased the truth even in my own memory. Story 30. After we completed a module on red-brown colorblindness in middle school biology, I told my classmates that I was red-brown colorblind in one eye. They would have me close my good eye and have me guess the color. it was incredibly dumb but seemed harmless. Unfortunately, they were so fascinated that it became disruptive and the teachers overheard. The teachers told my parents that I was apparently losing color vision in one eye, and it spiraled to me continuing to fake the situation until I had to come clean to a neurologist who was about to send me for not covered by our insurance MRI. Story 31. I missed the first day of primary 5. Don't know what that is in other countries, but I missed out on a work booklet that was supposed to last the year. When I came back and everyone done their assignments in this book and I pretended I did, had to volunteer to collect them for the teacher. Kid on I forgot it. And many other lies to pretend I had done the work in this booklet. I let it get too far and was terrified I'd get caught, but somehow managed to get away with it for the whole year. Story 32. A friend of the family had but length unwashed dreadlocks that I was a bit scared of as a very small child. His hair was bigger than me and had accidentally hit me once when he held me, so I think that was it. Anyway, one night I said I was afraid to go to bed alone without a nightlight and said that family friend might be in the closet and jump out and scare me. My dad freaked out and began to grill me about it, because he assumed that meant he had hidden in the closet before to have an affair with my mom. I was 3 or 4, so I didn't have the best capacity to explain that I'd never seen him in the closet and was just afraid of being smacked with his dreads and associated scary things with hiding in the closet, but I tried. My dad was an absolute piece of, so he used this as an excuse to accuse my mom of sleeping with the guy and beat her. Not once, which is bad enough, but so many times over the years we lost count. He knew well it wasn't true as he never once brought it up with a friend, but continued to insist it was true in privacy at home and that my mom was involved with him, and I saw and was sworn to secrecy but slipped. It got brought up frequently my entire childhood and the rest of my dad's life. No matter how many times I explained to him I never saw that man in the closet or alone with my mom and was only being a silly kid scared of scary things in the closet, he never chose to believe me. My mom never once made me feel like she held it against me or that I did anything wrong. A dumb comment when I was 34 is probably my biggest regret because it just made my mom's life harder. TLDR was scared of a family friend as small child for a silly non-reason and got my mom beaten many times over it. Story 33. Told my teacher I needed to skip class because my grandpa had died. Years later, at graduation, my very much alive grandpa showed up to thank her and the teacher had a heart attack right there. Story 34. When I was 7, I told my neighbor that my family had a pet monkey. No idea why. Just blurted it out one day like it was totally normal. She got super excited. She wanted to come over and meet it immediately. I panicked and I made excuses. It turned into this whole soap opera of a story. She told her whole class about it. Eventually my mom found out because someone asked her how the monkey was doing. She made me go back and tell the truth. It was so embarrassing and my neighbor looked so betrayed. Story 35. I told my teacher my dog ate my homework. The next week, she gave me a dog-proof folder. My parents had to explain I didn't even have a dog. Story 36. I used to say I was just tired all the time. But I wasn't tired, I was overwhelmed, anxious, and didn't know how to ask for help. Tired was the only word I had that people wouldn't question. Story 37. My kid asked what happens when you die. He was at the age of, and then what, and then what, and then what, and then what. I had been tired of it for a while, and I got used to answering all the and then what's before he asked. So I said when you die you get buried and then bugs eat your skin and eyes and guts and you become a skeleton and the skeleton turns to dust and you're gone forever. I forgot people were around and not everyone knew the backstory of his and then what's, and there were a lot of shocked faces. And then he went to church and asked if that's what happened to Jesus. Story 38. I told my grandma that I lost a tooth so the tooth fairy would come, but it was actually a mint candy. My grandma believed me, and the tooth fairy brought me money. Story 39. Some kid wanted to borrow 2 from me. The 2 was all I had. I didn't even like this kid and suspected I'd never see that 2 again. So after PE I went back to my backpack and shoved the 2 into my sock and then said it's gone. Someone must have stole it, he told the PE teacher despite me saying nah, it's okay, it was just 2. The teacher sent us to the principal's office. The principal was asking who he thought took it. I said I don't know. The other kid listed off half a dozen bullies from class. Now there's 8 of us in the principal's office. They made the kids empty their pockets and take off their shoes and socks. I was panicking because the 2 was in my sock. Luckily as the victim I didn't get searched. All these tough bullies started listing off more kids they thought did it. It was getting out of hand quick. Finally the principal was like, I guess the money is gone. I learned how many of these tough kids were snitches and that nobody in that PE class had 2 to their name. Story 40. My friend, let's call her Eva, lived in Germany for a year and thought wild boar were a myth or extinct. Her sister went to visit and they decided to go for a hike, so Eva started winding her sister up like beware of the wild boar. They will get you, just joking around, until her German housemate told her wild boar aren't a joke. They're pretty dangerous and can be quite aggressive, in an almost chastising tone. This was a shock to Eva. She can be quite anxious, so the idea of having been hiking many times completely unaware of a legitimate reason to be cautious was a bit of a shock to her. Story 41. When I was about 12 we were learning about color and light theory, and how our eyes react and all that shiz, and for some reason I told my teacher I was colorblind. I am not. Next lesson. Poor lady printed sheets with descriptions, specifically labeled and customized to support the needs of someone who was colorblind. I obviously just went along with it and hoped it never got brought up again. Story 42. When I was in 6th grade, we had a day where the entire elementary school was doing spring cleaning. All the grades 1st to 6th had an assigned duty. my class were in charge of sweeping and mopping all the classes. I was assigned to the second graders class, along with 3 other from my class. As is expected of second graders, they kept running into the class for one reason or another, and that made it hard for us to do our job. Now the second graders class for some reason is the only class with a curtain and it's always closed. Even though it faces the back of the school and there's trees covering the window and it's not facing the sun at any part of the day. So I made up a story that in the past someone hung themselves on one of the trees, and the reason it has those curtains is because sometimes during the daytime, the ghost of that student can be seen sitting on a branch of the tree, and it just so happened that day at that time, the ghost decides to hang around the tree. I made my group go along and we pretended to see the ghost and ran out the class. We needed a water break anyways. The story worked and it spread to all the second graders in about 1 hour. None of them wanted to come back to class, and my group was able to finish the work. Now 20 years later, I found out from one of my younger cousins who later went to my same school, that apparently it became a school legend that the second grade class is haunted. There was never a story like that the entire time I was there, so I guess I created an urban legend. And the story that's passed down has all of my made-up details with a couple added on, so I know it was the one I made up 20 years ago. Story 43: that I was a good liar. I was a really bad liar and my family made fun of me for it, so I bluffed that I was just pretending to be a bad liar with unnecessary lies so my more important lies wouldn't be suspected. For some stupid reason, that lame lie was the one they decided to believe. A quarter of a century later, they still think of me as a manipulative liar even though they've never seen a single example of that. Story 44: I hated red sauce as a kid. Pizza, spaghetti, basically anything tomato. Everyone either made fun of me or gave me odd looks. BC, what kid doesn't like pizza? So I would tell people I was allergic so they'd feel bad for judging me for being a weirdo. Years later, and I've been diagnosed with Crohn's and can no longer tolerate red sauce. I am devastated by the karmic retribution. BC, I miss that so much. Story 45: I told my grandmother I really liked the candle she bought me for my birthday. After that I got candles from all my family for birthdays and Christmas for years. I hated them. Story 46: my grandma got me an expensive doll as a nice gift for some big occasion in my life. I never wanted dolls, but especially not that doll, and my grandma was really fixated on wanting to buy me a doll. It had articulated joints and the knees elbows were the kind connected inside by some kind of tether. I didn't like the doll, I didn't hate it, but it just wasn't my kind of thing, and I was frustrated that I was given something so nice that I didn't like when there were so many other things I clearly liked and wanted. Plus the doll looked like a classmate of mine who always made me uncomfortable. My grandma asked me why I didn't play with it, and I made the excuse that the joints on the doll pinched my fingers, so I usually would just dress her and set her up in a pose and leave her there. I even tried to make it sound nice by saying I liked that she had articulated joints so I could pose her and try to draw her. My grandma proceeded to take it back from me and call the company repeatedly demanding a replacement doll because this one must have had faulty joints if it was pinching my fingers. She somehow bullied them into a refund and a replacement. I had to take that doll to her house with me and pretend to play with it so many times, and it made me sick to my stomach every time because of how bad it felt to not like what should be a nice gift and the trouble my grandma put people through because of my attempt at a white lie. Every time I found that doll again, while cleaning it made me feel so awful. Story 47: I was little and maybe misremembering terribly, but I think I pranked my parents by faking passing out like I'd seen in cartoons, which may have resulted in my having an unnecessary spinal tap. Story 48: when I was 7 I would make my lips look super dry because I just wanted to be allowed to wear my mom's lipstick. My parents thought the extreme chapped lips were a sign of something and took me to the doctor, and that led to me having surgery to get my tonsils out and something else too, I don't remember. I didn't have the heart to tell them I just wanted to wear lipstick. Story 49: my husband has a few good stories, but this one is my favorite. As a young man, he didn't feel like working on a particular day, so he complained to his boss about stomach pain, saying he needed to go home. His boss said he needed a doctor's note, so he went to a local clinic. He told the GP that he had severe stomach pain. The GP pushed on his lower abdomen and he moaned in fake pain. He must have done a good job of faking it, because the doctor called the emergency department and immediately sent him to hospital. He arrives at the hospital and repeats the performance. The ER doctor is alarmed. "Sir, we suspect you may have acute appendicitis. You need to be admitted." He reluctantly agrees. Before he knows it, he is being prepped for surgery. So now he's going in for emergency surgery, all because he wanted the afternoon off work. The surgeon removes his appendix, despite the lack of infection, inflammation, or rupture. The next day, he leaves hospital with a goodie bag of pain relief, and spends the next 2 weeks off work recovering from the appendicitis he never had. Apparently it was totally worth it all. Story 50: my older sister got glasses when she was in 4th grade and I was in 2nd and I wanted a pair too, so I told my parents that I had vision problems. They took me to an eye doctor that accused me of lying I was, but my parents believed me and I ended up getting glasses. Flash forward over 10 years and I now have a heavy prescription and cannot see and it's probably because I messed up my eyes early on for no reason and didn't want to admit I was lying. Story 51: I told my cousin that if you eat peanuts and drink milk at the same time you gain the ability to understand squirrels. He tried it, didn't work, but now he's a vegan wildlife photographer who swears a gray one winked at him once.